Right, something kind of weird happened to me the other day. I seen my roommate, but he wasn't there. It's 'cause he left for home, which is like 500 miles away, 2 nights ago, and last night I seen him in the kitchen, and he's not supposed to be back till Monday afternoon, so it's like 2 days from now. And I'm left with two or three possible theories. First one being teleportation, second one being time travel, maybe some kind of hologram, or maybe even a ghost. Lucky for me, there was a camera nearby. Let's take a look. Right, so to further explore my theories, I made a quick trip to Wikipedia. So teleportation would be the transfer of one object from one place to another relatively instantaneous. However, the technology for such an event does not exist yet. So in this particular case, it is impossible. Although time travel has never been proven possible or impossible, I would doubt that my roommate would be the first ever to accomplish such a feat. As for holograms, although there might be some technology there that could give you a three-dimensional static image, the technology is most definitely not there to give you a three-dimensional moving image. So the holographic theory would be out the window. Ghosts are often associated with the presence of a deceased individual's spirit in a physical manifestation. Although my roommate is not quite deceased, something about his presence in my kitchen the other night was somewhat paranormal. The idea of a second sight comes to mind. There is no clear definition on second sights, however certain generalizations have come about. For one thing, they may only be seen by someone called a seer. That is somebody who has the gift of being extra sensitive to the paranormal world. People with the gift can often see spirits roaming from the world of the dead to the world of the alive. Another generalization is that second sights often have to do with death. They are premonitions. You see, the seer would see someone that he knew, and oftentimes would be indication of great harm or death. However, there is the odd case of there being some second sights where good things happen after, such as the birth of a child or just something generally fun. The second sight would be seen by someone called a seer. The seer was someone with the gift. This gift being the ability to have second sights, to see spirits that have wandered from the paranormal world to our real world. Now, seers were often considered very religious people back in the day, especially before pre-Christian times. And it's to say that a real seer would be able to actually predict the future with these premonitions. Now, seers would often have to study quite a while before they could start interpreting visions. In many cases, the standard was 12 years of study before they could actually start interpreting second sights to tell the future. Ever since the 17th century, there have been many well-documented cases of second sight in Scotland, one of which was the vision of Ticonderoga. There was a Mr. Campbell in Scotland, and one night he heard a loud knocking at his door. It was a bloody stranger asking him to held him asylum from the authorities. So Mr. Campbell, obliged by tradition, offered to let him in. Minutes later, he heard another loud knocking at the door. It was the police, telling him that his cousin had been murdered and they're looking for the suspect. Mr. Campbell, obliged by the hospitality, did not reveal where the suspect was. That night, after he went to bed, his cousin Donald, who'd been brutally murdered by said stranger, came to haunt him. So, in order to deal with all the hauntings and to help him stop him, Campbell resolved by telling the said murderer to maybe go hide in a cave Thus he'd still be hospitable to him, and would not have his cousin haunt him for holding him in his house. The next night, his cousin came back to haunt him. He said that you will die at Ticonderoga. Campbell was scared. The next day, he ran over to the cavern to find the stranger and tell him he had to leave. However, the stranger was gone. But only be years later, when he immigrates to America, shipped out on army duties, where a native guide told him where Ticonderoga really was. It was then that Campbell knew that he would die there. At the age of 55, Campbell finally died in battle at Ticonderoga, thus being one of the most famous documented cases of second sight.
Another famous story of a second sight was one of a man in Scotland who has been haunted by actually his own double. This is a strange case, but what happened was he was getting haunted by his own double, and it was getting scary. After a while, he started to get annoyed by this double. He then went to a friend's house, where a double of course followed him, and asked his friend to throw a piece of coal at the double's face. Sure enough, his friend did, and the double went away. The very next day, his own double caught up with him in his own field and severely beat him, and he was bedridden for 14 days. Yeah. Another prediction was of a Mr. Kenneth from Scotland. His prediction was quite graphic and announced the doom of many things, most of them which came true. He announced the doom of families, of all the chiefs in Scotland, of the sons of Mackenzies, and he announced the coming of 4 idiotic chiefs. Now, given certain interpretations, this vision actually came true throughout the course of history of the Highlands. After a while in Scotland, there was a Mr. Edward Casey, whom actually did some sort of encyclopedia on second sight phenomenon. Mr. Casey was a very learned man. He was educated in second sight and psychics, and he was actually considered to be a dream healer by some. Now, Mr. Casey set out to describe a bunch of characteristics to look out for in case you were ever confronted by a second sight premonition. Most of these involve clothes. For one thing, if your premonition was wearing nighttime clothes or pajamas or bedtime wearings, then that would mean death was very much so imminent. However, in contrast to if you was wearing funeral clothes, that means the premonition could indicate good times ahead, or more death. Also, if he was wearing daytime clothes, it would mean the premonition would involve some kind of harm, but not necessarily fatal. Also, there was the premonitions of if someone would be lost at sea or drowned. If the person were to drown, his clothes was to be soaking wet, and if the person was lost at sea, he would be glowing of sorts.
Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 2.